I felt good when my marriage to Cal Fielding passed the proverbial 7-year itch. Although I, Loretta, had received my share of male attention, appropriate and inappropriate, over the years, I had never once been seriously tempted. Having an attentive, compassionate, and loving husband helped considerably. Although I had very little experience to compare my husband to other men in the bedroom, at the time I was very satisfied with the quantity and quality of sex we were having. If I could say my husband had any shortcomings, it was his dedication to getting our finances in order. He was a fanatic. If I ever meet Dave Ramsey in person, he better run. We recently went to one of his seminars, and Cal survived the conversion. At first, I supported him completely. It all made sense. Get rid of debt, build up an emergency fund, live like no one else from that point forward. After years of living with this financial cult, I've come to the conclusion that it's one of those ideas that sounds easy because it's simple. What most people don't realize is that simple doesn't always equal easy. For example, is it easy to lose weight? No. Is it simple? Yes. Eat less, exercise. For financial security, cut your spending to the bare minimum and pay off your debts in ascending order, smallest first. Simple? Yeah. Easy? No, hell no. We saved and saved and saved. Most of the time, we ate rice and beans. That's right. No desserts, no sodas, no meat, no milk or dairy products. No new clothes, appliances, furniture. No cards or gifts for Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, Father's Day, or Mother's Day. Cal took over preventive maintenance on our cars. This has actually resulted in us spending more money. Cal is not mechanically inclined. In addition to his day job, he delivers pizzas at night. I worked nights as a waitress. On weekends, we collected metal from other people's trash to sell for scrap. It was hard. It was humiliating. My dedication began to wane, even though I saw the progress we were making. When all we had left was the mortgage debt on the house, it seemed almost insurmountable. I was ready for a break. I was afraid we would drive ourselves to death without being able to enjoy the fruits of our labor. I wore the same outfits to work for years, sometimes repairing torn or stained ones. I went without makeup, as far as Cal knew. In fact, I begged my girlfriends for makeup they didn't need. I wore their leftovers to the office and made sure to wash them off before going home. One day I forgot to take my makeup off, and Cal was furious. On the one hand, Cal said I was so beautiful, I didn't need makeup. On the other hand, he said I was sabotaging our future with stupid spending. When he found out it was given to me, it got even worse. He started yelling even more about how I should be ashamed to accept charity from others. We ended up having to go to a marriage counselor, one of those recommended by Dave Ramsey's organization. I was pleasantly surprised that they said it was more important to have a budget we both agreed on than to finalize our goals as soon as possible. Why did we need to get out of debt if it was going to cost us our marriage? Cal reluctantly agreed to a budget that included work clothes, basic makeup, and occasional trips to a restaurant and movie. Our goal of getting out of debt would be pushed back for a while, but our marriage would benefit. Things got better on the home front. Well, almost better. I think Cal was upset that the counselor didn't take his side. As I was allowed to become more human, in my mind, I started participating in girl talk in the office. Before, no one wanted to hear about how frugal we were. Even though Cal and I compromised on our budget to allow us to enjoy life more, I was shocked at how much my office mates spent on. Well, everything. Nothing seemed to matter to them except the amount of the monthly payment. Their spending habits weren't the most shocking trait. It was the sex. They talked not only about sex with their spouses, including size comparisons, but also about sex with their lovers. And they talked about sex with their lovers like it was no big deal, as if everyone was doing it. Over time, the shock value of their stories diminished as they continued to talk about it and no one was caught. Their stories began to sound exciting, romantic, and more like something I might want to do. I had absolutely no reason to seek out extramarital sex other than the fact that others had it, and I didn't. I was beginning to want it more and more. The descriptions of the girls' sexual escapades made me realize that Cal and I were having vanilla sex. They seemed to be enjoying the full range of Baskin-Robbins flavors. Cal continued to keep his nose to the grindstone as far as our financial life was concerned. I began to divide our life into two parts, financial and non-financial. On the financial side, Cal and I were partners. In the non-financial part, I felt like we were just acquaintances. Back then, I was not only vulnerable, but actively seeking. I wanted more rewards in my life, and not cheap ones at that. I wanted sex with another man. Jake Sutherland worked in the same office. He'd always been one to flirt on the edge of inappropriate. Verbal reprimands from his boss hardly deterred him. Jake seemed surprised when one day I started flirting back. He quickly realized that I was frustrated at having to do without material help. We started with him taking me out to dinner. I loved his stories about places he visited simply because he wanted to be there. When Cal had to leave for an overnight business trip one day, Jake and I expanded our relationship to include late-night get-togethers with dancing and drinking. I was scared to death when Cal came home the next day. Surely he would realize I had done something lewd and frivolous, even if I hadn't paid for it. As with the lunch dates with Jake, I'd gotten away with a night out. Now I was willing to take a bigger risk. By letting him pay for everything, I was beginning to accumulate a debt to Jake. There was no doubt in my mind that he wanted to be compensated. Gradually, I allowed him more and more liberties when we were together. When he learned of Cal's impending 3-day absence, he let me know that it was time for his big payoff. I told him I couldn't because I was married. He berated me, calling me a tease among other swear words. He promptly dropped me off at my house and left in a clean rubber, which attracted the attention of some of my neighbors. Jake never spoke to me again, other than the usual greetings and goodbyes at the office. Lucky me, I thought. Since then, my looks had become much more reserved. There were contenders for my affection from the office and from the cafes I went to once a week, but no one received a nomination, much less the title of lover. One evening, months later, Cal came home preoccupied with talking about his work, which rarely happened. He revealed that he had just hired a new person to his team. He was excited about the new person's experience and ideas. Cal told me that he would have to work late some nights to get the new employee up to speed on current projects. I knew that the phrase, having to work late, was used by my coworkers as a euphemism for an after-hours affair. I thought about his options for a mistress. His secretary was a little older than us, but she had big breasts and a butt. All the other female employees were married, but that didn't matter much in my office. He had plenty of options to choose from. On the second night of his supposed overtime, I couldn't take it. My curiosity was working overtime, assuming he wasn't working. I drove to his office and parked on the street from where the parking lot was visible, but not too visible myself. At 10 o'clock, Cal came out with a man I didn't recognize. The woman hadn't been there before. I figured it was the new guy he'd told me about. They said goodnight to each other, separated, and headed for their cars, of which there were only 2 left in the parking lot. I got out of there as fast as I could, 3 minutes ahead of Cal. I was relieved. I was looking forward to the Christmas party at Cal's office. For once, I could be with Cal, eating and drinking to my heart's content without criticizing him for being wasteful. He even let me buy a new dress on sale at Goodwill. The highlight of the evening was meeting Paul, the new man. My goodness, he was handsome, trim, and his smile made me blush. He was accompanied by a woman who I was sure was a Playboy bunny. Although she was short in stature, she had large breasts and buns. Her dress showed off both. All in all, she exuded sexiness. Cal introduced me to Paul. Paul introduced me to Brandy. We sat together at a table. I had a hard time not staring at Paul. Paul and Brandy got up to dance. Cal informed me that Paul had met Brandy just a few days ago. He said, "Paul is a magnet for girls, a magnet of industrial strength. In fact, the ease with which women fall for him is just one part of his very privileged life. His parents are wealthy, and Paul is about to inherit from his grandfather. Obviously, his studies and sports come easily to him. However, at the office, he doesn't slack off and is reluctant to work hard. I think I'm envious. The only problem we face at work is that all the women in our office drool when Paul is around. They don't have time to do anything when he leaves his office. Paul told me that he won't hit on the women he works with. I wish the women who work with us had promised me otherwise." Later, Paul and I danced while Brandy and Cal danced. Paul was very smooth on the dance floor. We danced close, but not as close as he and Brandy. It was like an extra layer of skin on Paul as they danced. I tried to inhale Paul, not just his cologne, but his looks, his feelings, his words, his essence. As they danced, I came across his bulge. It was huge. He apologized. I told him not to worry. I almost said, "It's no big deal," but it was a big deal. He had to tell me when the music stopped because I wasn't listening. The four of us danced and talked the rest of the evening, often switching partners. I noticed that whenever Cal complimented Brandy, I think he was in love with her, Paul made sure to compliment me. I wasn't sure if Paul was trying to get Cal to stop hitting on his date or if Paul actually liked me. I hoped for the latter. We all left the party together and gave the valets our tickets. Paul's car pulled out first, and ours stayed behind. After another round of goodbye hugs, we followed Paul's car out of the parking lot and into the street. I noticed that even before Paul's car pulled out of the parking lot, Brandy was leaning over Paul and doing something to his lower body for a while. Soon her head started bobbing up and down. I turned to Paul, who was looking at this with wide eyes. I was so horny that, mimicking Brandy's baby voice, I started on my husband. It was the wildest public sex of our lives. It was the prelude to a very enjoyable night of sex. I assumed Cal was imagining Brandy when I fucked him. But that was fine with me, since I was definitely imagining Paul. And I was definitely interested in the actual size of his bulge. After that night, Cal was more socially and financially liberated than ever. We started hosting couples and going out more often. Of course, Paul was the first and most frequent guest we invited. I teased Cal, saying that he probably couldn't wait to see Brandy again. He replied that Brandy, who came with Paul, might not. If office gossip was to be believed, Paul was rarely seen with the same girl twice. I found that interesting. We had a sit-down, and Paul showed up with a girl who looked nothing like Brandy, although sexy in her own way. Her name was Sybil, and she was tall, dark-haired, and slender. She moved like a runway model. She might as well have been a model. Unlike Brandy, she was only a couple years younger than us and seemed very mature and intelligent. Like a curious hostess, I asked the typical question, "How did you two meet?" Sybil replied, blushing. "Our carts collided in the supermarket the other day. We started talking, and the next thing I knew, I had already given him my name and phone number. I never do this with men when I first meet them, but in Paul's case, it felt right. Something seemed to spark. He surprised me by calling later that evening and asked me to do him a favor and accompany him to this celebration. I agreed to do so. Then again, I wouldn't do something like that with someone I barely knew. So, as you can see, Paul and I are just beginning to get to know each other." Later, I made Sybil stand alone. "I guess I should tell you that Paul doesn't usually keep girlfriends this long. I don't know exactly for what reason. Well, I'm not a girlfriend yet, but everything I've seen and heard from him makes me want one. Can you tell me how I should act around him?" "Not really. I guess just be honest with him." "Thank you." Sybil's behavior was far more restrained than Brandy's, but that made it no less effective. He laughed appropriately at Paul's jokes, listened intently to everything he said, and she often put her hand on his arm to show subtle affection. I was jealous. I would have loved to have clung to Paul anywhere. Sybil was doing quite well. She lasted 2 months. We didn't know any details about their relationship. Paul never proposed, and we never asked. One day at dinner, Paul brought Julie instead of Sybil. It was as if Paul said next, and the beautiful girl agency sent him the next couple. Of course, she was gorgeous, too, this time with red hair and a body type something between Brandy and Sybil. We danced that evening and switched partners several times. This time, I didn't fail to check out Paul's bulge. Paul apologized again. "I'm sorry, Loretta. I hope you don't think I'm being rude. It's hard for me not to get aroused dancing with a beautiful woman like you. I'm very sorry." "No," I thought. Did I really just say that? Oh shit, the cat's out of the bag. Paul smiled devilishly. "In that case, come here, my dear." He pulled me closer to him, and we rubbed against each other for the rest of the dance. When we sat back down, I hoped Cal hadn't noticed the lustful look in my eyes when I looked at Paul. Paul, on the other hand, hadn't changed. When we started dancing again, we continued where we left off. At the end of the song, Paul whispered, "Loretta, I have to kiss you tonight. Please make it happen." I had already surveyed possible hiding places. Go to the bathroom after me. A few minutes later, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. Julie didn't offer to go as she had gotten more possessive after seeing Paul and I dancing. I went to the restroom, used it, and went back outside. When Paul came in, I led him over to the balcony door and opened it. A strong gust of cold wind blew in on us. I didn't care. I was more than warm inside. After making sure no one could see us, Paul and I nestled our lips against each other almost immediately. After too short a time, he said, "I think we should get back to the house before they miss us." "I know, Paul, but I don't want to." We managed to pull out and go back separately. Julie stared daggers at me. Cal looked uncomprehending. Julie made sure she spent the rest of the evening dancing with just Paul. I was still reeling from my first kiss with Paul. It was more than 3 weeks before Cal or I talked about Paul. Cal had been promoted, which meant 2 things. We would be able to pay off the mortgage faster, and Cal would have to travel more. He actually had a trip coming up that meant he would be gone for a whole week. He surprised me by saying, "Loretta, I'm worried about you being alone for so long. I hope you don't mind, but I've asked Paul to keep an eye on you. Maybe take you out to dinner or something so you won't be too lonely. There are plenty of men who would love to take advantage of a beautiful woman like you." I had a hard time coming up with an appropriate response as my heart leapt with joy. "I'll miss you, dear, but I don't think I need a babysitter. Are you sure it's okay with Paul?" "Yes. By the way, he said he wants to take you to an art exhibit if you're interested." "That would be nice for a change. He's a really good friend to both of us." "Yes, Loretta, he is." Paul and I went out to dinner the first night Cal wasn't home. I got goosebumps with excitement. It was a romantic dinner with wine at a restaurant where we knew no one and no one knew us. Soon I was already feeling relaxed and trying to keep my feelings for Paul from being obvious to the other people in the restaurant, just to be safe. We made small talk during our meal and then went to the museum. He walked me through the building and many rooms of the museum until we were in a room where no one else was there. He turned to me and said, "This is my favorite room. Do you know why?" "The paintings?" "No. I like it because we can kiss and not worry. We can hear someone else coming in 2 rooms over." He kissed me deeply. Soon I was immersed in him. After a few strong caresses and stroking, we heard someone's rumbling footsteps. He asked, "Where should we go?" "To my house. I need to be home when Cal calls." We headed outside. Yes, we had a landline. It was cheaper. Paul and I went straight to the guest bedroom and started taking off our clothes. At that moment, I realized that I was no longer Cal's woman. I belonged to Paul. That's what I told him. He agreed. The next night, he came over for dinner, and we spent the night in bed. It wasn't as good as the night before. Paul seemed distracted. "What's the matter, Paul? Do you feel guilty?" "I'm the one who should feel it, but I don't. Loving you feels so right." "It's not guilt, though we both should feel it. It's the work. Loretta, I don't know how to tell you this, but Cal does things at work that are at least unethical, if not illegal." "What, Cal? I find that hard to believe." "Me too. I didn't pay attention to it at first, hoping it was just a temporary glitch, but it turned out not to be, and there seems to be a large sum of money involved. Come to think of it, he recently told me that something was going on at work that meant we'd be able to pay off the mortgage. We'd have an emergency fund, and we'd be able to start a family. I assumed it was a bonus or a promotion. Oh my God, what are you going to do?" "I hate to tell you, but I sent out my resume. I got an offer, a really good offer, from one of our competitors. It means I'll be moving to Akron in a month or so. I don't want to be here when the axe falls on Cal." "Paul, no, not right now. We just started our relationship. You can't leave me now." "I don't want to leave you. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about us lately. Loretta, why don't you come with me? We can start a new life together in Akron." In a split second, I made the most important decision of my life after marriage. I made the decision with my heart, not my head. "How can we do that, honey?" "You can divorce Cal and just come with me. We can get married as soon as your divorce is final. Please say yes." Paul, you know Cal will fight the divorce, probably more for financial reasons than to keep me. He's so fanatical about getting out of debt. We'd have to divide our assets and it would kill him. He's worked so hard to become financially independent. What if you don't ask for anything from him in the divorce? You really don't need anything. I have enough money from work and family. Besides, I'll inherit a lot of money when my grandfather dies. You don't have to ask for anything if he agrees to a 30-day quick, uncontested divorce. Oh, Paul, are you really sure you want me that badly? Let me show you how much I want you. He nearly killed me with multiple ecstasies. The next day I was too sore to walk. He had convinced me. The return of the feces. Paul and I decided to wait for a special event, the burning of our mortgage. As soon as Cal returned from his trip, he rejoiced that we were very close to being completely debt-free. We planned a celebration at our home. We invited friends and family and even called Dave Ramsey, who personally congratulated us. We shouted over the phone, "We are debt-free!" When the celebration was over, it was just Cal, Paul, and me. Cal proposed a toast to the three of us and our continued close relationship. Paul and I did not drink to the toast. Cal looked puzzled. I took a deep breath and said, "Cal, congratulations on being debt-free. You have sacrificed so much to reach your goal. Unfortunately, in the process, you sacrificed the way you treated me. I'm afraid I have some bad news to attach to your good news because of that. There's no way I can think of a way to soften the blow, so here it is. In this envelope is your copy of my divorce petition. I didn't want you to be handed it and humiliated in your office." "Divorce? What divorce? Oh, now I get it. This is a prank. You almost had me fooled. Were you in on it too, Paul?" "More than you realize, I'm afraid. Cal, this is my resignation letter. I'm sorry I did this to you, and it's getting worse. I'm leaving soon for a new job, and Loretta has agreed to go with me as my future wife." Cal sank heavily onto the couch. "I can't believe it. Loretta, we've both worked hard to realize our dream, and now it's come true. How could you betray me and our marriage? I was ready to talk about having kids. Damn it. And you, Paul, I thought we were best friends. I've got 2 daggers in my back. Fuck you both in the ass." I spoke up. "Cal, you'll see on my statement that I'm not asking for anything but my personal belongings, my car, and the money in my own savings account. I'm asking that you sign it and agree to an express divorce. Let's get this outrage over with so we can both move on." I'm having a hard time figuring out what all this means for my life. My first thought is that if what you say is true and you won't take any of our money, I'll sign. I know that in a normal divorce, I would only get half at best. As for the 30-day option, I can't wait to get rid of both of you as soon as possible. Just the sight of the 2 of you and the realization of what you must have been doing behind my back makes me sick. Get out now, both of you. We thought you might react this way. I already have a packed bag in my car. I'll pick up the rest of my stuff when you leave for work tomorrow. I'm staying with Paul until we leave town. I'm sorry, Cal. You probably deserve someone better than me. You're still relatively young, handsome, and financially in great shape. A lot of women would consider you a great catch because that's what you are. You're just not good enough to want to keep me. Like I said, get out, or I swear to God I'll... Paul and I walked away. I was crying, and Paul had tears too. We assured each other that we had done the right thing, even though we had hurt a man we truly admired. Paul worked for a few more weeks, enough to make it easier to replace him. I noticed that Cal had put our house on the market. I cried because I knew how much paying the mortgage meant to him. It was almost meaningless now. I felt so sorry for him. I applied at work, but I ended up having to stay longer than Paul to make my deputy's job easier. He took advantage of that time and got ahead of me to find us a place to live in Akron. He sent me videos of potential homes to help me choose our new home. I stayed, worked, and packed. Just before I finished my work, the decision to divorce came up. I thought about calling Cal to thank him for many years, but was afraid to pick at the wound he was probably feeling. After packing my things, I called Paul, as I had done every night since he'd left. This evening, his phone message said the number was no longer in service. I tried again. Same message. I tried calling the hotel where he was staying. There was no such person registered. Early the next day, I called his cell phone again. Same message. I started to panic. I called his and Cal's old office. HR said they only had the same number I dialed. As a last resort, I asked to speak to Cal to see if he knew anything. I fainted when I heard, "Cal doesn't work here anymore. He quit at the same time Paul did." I heard they both got jobs at the same place. I woke up from my fainting spell at a complete loss. I called their office back and was told that they had not been informed of the new company they had moved to work for. I asked if they knew of a similar company in Akron. They didn't. The real estate agent who was selling our house informed me that he worked through Cal's attorney who had power of attorney. As I suspected, Cal's attorney was not authorized to disclose anything about his whereabouts. However, he said that Cal had asked him to tell me that Cal would send me a letter explaining what had happened. Despite my despair and anger, I had a lot of work to do. I managed to rescind my resignation and return to my old job. I arranged for the landlord to take over Paul's apartment rent. I had to transfer the utility bills from Paul's name to my own. I had to open a new checking account with what little money I had. I had to take out a loan against my 401k to start a new life, obviously alone. One of my main activities was crying. I cried a lot. A month after I was dumped, a letter arrived. No return address. I was so curious to know why this had happened that I ignored my fear of the contents and quickly opened it to read it. Dear Loretta, this letter is from both of us. The first part is from Cal. I'll get right to the point. You can thank your old lover Jake for setting this whole thing up. He told me about you two fooling around, told me to get back at you for not wanting to continue your affair. I was devastated. Completely and utterly devastated. I thought you and I were on the same page about our marriage and our future. We were both sacrificing ourselves for the same goals, and then Jake made me realize I was wrong. I came up with a scheme to test you in case it was a one-time fling with Jake. I paid a few guys to hit on you, and even though you didn't sleep with them, it turned out it wasn't that you didn't want to sleep with them, it was that they weren't the kind of guys you'd sleep with. The solution came when I found out Paul was single. Paul was the younger brother of a good friend of mine growing up. He always wanted to spend time with us. We let him, for a price. We thought we'd teach the little brat not to mess around with the older boys. We took advantage of him by making him do all sorts of naughty things, some of which were sexual in nature. As he grew up, he became so handsome that girls flocked to him, and he became adept at getting girls to hit on him. When I was in college, I invited Paul and his brother to a ball game and the party afterward. When we got back to my apartment, we were already drunk. His brother had passed out. Paul and I got to talking. He asked me if I remembered our days playing circle jerk. I replied that I remembered them leading to some of the most pleasurable ejaculations I had ever experienced. He asked if I wanted to do it again now. I asked how we could do it since it was just the two of us. He offered to show me how to do it. To make a long story short, Paul announced that he was bisexual, but leaning toward homosexuality. He said he always wanted to be with me. I thanked him, but I was going to marry a woman. He asked me not to forget about me. When I called him and asked what would I do if you cheated on me, he readily agreed. We both knew he wanted to be with me again. I was surprised at how well he was doing in the office. Gradually, we became lovers. The fact that you and I were married no longer mattered. I decided that your infidelity had broken our marriage vows for both of us. We changed our revenge plan so that he and I would leave together, leaving you with nothing. You could probably find us if you tried, but why try? No crimes have been committed. No money was stolen from you. Paul broke his promise. Good luck prosecuting him for that. Paul. Loretta, I imagine my betrayal may have hurt you the most. On the one hand, I'm sorry. You are a very attractive woman, and I enjoyed our intimate relationship. But the fact is, I've known and loved Cal longer than you have. When he called me and told me about this scheme that would lead to your divorce, I was shocked. You may be asking yourself, how could I have done this to you? I'm afraid it was simple for me. You had Cal. You left him for sex with other men. All you had to do to keep him was keep your legs crossed. I sympathize with you a little, but not much. It's hardly any consolation to you, but I'll do my best to make him happy. I know I would never cheat on him with a woman or another man. Loretta, don't try to get him back. He's mine now. Your ex-husband and lover, Cal and Paul. Epilogue. The story you have just read was written as part of the intensive therapy I have been attending since my fall from grace. I had no trouble blaming myself for the situation and preparing myself to not repeat my mistakes in the future. Most of all, I struggled with anger at Cal and Paul for the deception they set up for me and anger at myself for falling for it. I'd really wanted revenge. I still have thoughts of accidents, fatal STDs, being beaten up late at night by unknown people or castrated. My favorite thing right now? All of the above. One nice thing happened at work. Several women who bragged about their affairs have been caught. So far, there have been 2 divorces and mandatory counseling for another couple. Since I was caught around the same time they were, no one seems to have ever figured out who told their husbands about having boyfriends. That concludes my story. I gotta go. Excuse me, what's that smell? Oh yeah, some bitches on fire. For some reason, I find it easier to take in when I'm not alone. Disclaimer. Although the heroine of this story had a bad opinion of Dave Ramsey and his theory of finance, I don't think so. I've seen several examples where the lives of couples working his system have changed for the better.